What is up everyone, and welcome back to some more Formula 1 2020 Championship mode. Last time we were in Singapore, things actually went pretty well considering I started in 20th because of a qualifying disqualification. I ended up finishing P9, I made some very good overtakes on a few cars, and yeah, I was pretty proud of my performance. However, I feel like I could have extracted a lot more had I not cocked up the qualifying. This time we're in Sochi. It's typically a pretty good race for me. However, I have a bit of a history with Sergio Perez, specifically in Sochi. In my first ever modern this engine Formula One game, which was F1 2018, I I did a 100% race around Sochi as part of my first season of career mode. I believe I was driving for Renault at the time, actually, alongside Nico Hülkenberg, and Sergio Perez got a puncture on one of the early laps, but didn't retire and chose not to box. And so there were, I think, in the 100% race, there were like 5 safety cars and about 8 VSCs or something like that, because they kept calling them, obviously, because he had a puncture. But he would not box. He was completely unwavering in that regard. And yeah, that meant that he ended up finishing about 10 laps down from whoever won that race, which I don't remember. I just remember specifically that that very bizarre circumstance. So we're loading my Russia setup for this one. I'm just going to double check the weather. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be nice all weekend. So let's get out there. But yeah, hopefully that Perez performance in that case was not an omen for how my race is going to go around Sochi in this video. But yeah, it's the only time I've ever experienced something like that. Now bear in mind that was like 4 or 5 days after the game came out, because I was hardcore addicted to F1 2018 when I first played it. Bear in mind this was the last F1 Codemasters F1 game I played before that point was F1 2014, and that game, I'm sure that a few of you will agree with me, is a tiny bit of a disaster of a video game. And so needless to say, I was quite excited when I got F1 2018, and I was doing like 3 or 400% distance races every single day for the full first week it came out. I did an entire season in a week when I was doing 100% distance races, which is pretty good when you think about it, given that they usually, if you include doing all the practice programs and full qualifying and everything, that's like maybe 3 hours per race weekend, maybe a bit longer, 3 to 4 hours per race weekend. I was doing overtime on that game. I think the most I've done in this game is 2 race weekends in the same day. Interestingly enough, that's actually the day I've been recording this. I did both Spa and Monza this morning before I recorded. So it's P4 in qualifying in the end. Pretty good. I'm not sure how good this setup is, honestly. I feel like it could be slightly better, but you know, I'm not going to complain with P4. That's about what I'd want.
We're all ready for tomorrow's race, but before we begin, let's have a quick look at those who will be fronting the grid. Hamilton, Bottas, and Max Verstappen. With qualifying wrapped up, we now have our grid lineup for the big race tomorrow. Be sure to join us then for what will no doubt be a fantastic race.
Usual suspects in the top 3 then, and then it's me in 4th as usual. Like I said, I'm aiming for P3 in the championship. I think I can jump Bottas if I'm lucky, but it remains to be seen. I finished in 9th last race, so the difficulty hasn't changed between the 2 races. I think I'm currently on 89 difficulty, which I've been on since my race in Hungary. Oh no, actually I finished outside the points in Hungary, so I'm on 88 difficulty. The highest I've been in this season is 90. If you're unfamiliar with the rules, I bump it up whenever I win 1 point. I bump it up 1 point. And then if I finish outside the points, I bump it down. And I've only had 2 finishes outside the points in Britain and Hungary.
It's time to head down to the track now for today's championship race. And I wonder, who's going to come out on top? It's full throttle for around 56% of the lap here at the Sochi Autodrome, a 3.6-mile run around the site of the 2014 Winter Olympics. 12 right turns and 6 left turns give us a total count of 18, with passing opportunities available into turns 1 and 13. Now, Anthony Davidson, I wonder, might we be in for some early pit stops today from the midfield teams, all trying to put some pressure on or disrupting things for the leaders up front?
If you're in the middle of the pack, you know, you've got your own race to run, I don't think they're going to be thinking about causing trouble up front. However, closer to the head of the pack, don't be surprised to see some split strategies. If you're running second and third, for example, bringing one car in for an undercut while leaving the other one out there longer can put a lot of pressure on the leader and maybe force them into an error.
It's time to see how our drivers are stacking up after yesterday's exciting qualifying session. Lewis Hamilton lines up on pole position and Valtteri Bottas will line up alongside. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Verstappen, Perez, Alexander Albon and Ricciardo, Leclerc, Sainz, Vettel and Lando Norris, Gasly, Fiat, Esteban Ocon and Stroll, Raikkonen, Magnussen, Romain Grosjean and George Russell, Giovinazzi and Nicholas Latifi. Which of these talented drivers will come out on top today?
My money's on Giovinazzi. I think he can pull it off. Who would have guessed? It's a one-stop, 7 and 6. Alright, let's go. Let's ace this start. It's a long run down to turn 1. Let's go. What a superb display of driving there to perfectly position myself into P1. A little bit of alliteration there for you, and immediately stumbling over my words and exceeding track limits to follow. It's a pretty quick track. I run extremely low downforce here, one of the lowest downforce setups I run on the entire calendar, because it's basically just a bunch of straights with a few quick corners, all flat, basically no elevation whatsoever in this circuit. You can see why people find it boring. It does basically look like a car park. It definitely doesn't look like a race circuit, but I can assure you it is. And it's one, like I said, that I'm typically alright at, as evidenced by the fact that I managed to go from P4 to P1 in the first starting straight. So from here on out, all I got to do is just maintain the lead. I need to brake slightly before the braking indication, because when you're running incredibly low downforce, it can lie. And I also need to be careful not to cut the track at any moments, because I've already got one warning from the start of the race, so I don't want to get too many more of those. So yeah, I think the Mercedes definitely have the supreme pace around here, if I had to guess. And I think I will probably come under pressure from them at some point during this race. If I can just get onto the medium tyres ahead of them, I feel like I can probably get the victory here. But ultimately what I'm aiming to do is finish ahead of Bottas in any race I can, because I think I'm 45 behind him at the moment. Which means that, again, it's not guaranteed that even if I win every race, I'll overtake him. With only 6 left on the calendar, he just needs a few good results here and there. But the more good results I can get, and the more I can prevent him from getting good results, the better, and the better my chances of getting P3 in this championship. Like I said, I'm pretty sure my chances of P1 are all but gone at this point. It's going to be a very close fight between Hamilton and Verstappen, I think, that could go down to the wire in Abu Dhabi potentially. And hopefully, you know, I can just throw a bit of disorder in that fight by getting a few wins here and there. If I win here, I believe it would be my 5th win of the season, if I'm not mistaken. It should be my 6th, but obviously that was that error in Monza that means it will only be my 5th if it happens. So far I've won in Australia, Azerbaijan, France and Austria. And immediately the fastest lap falls out of my hands and into the cars behind me, signalling that they definitely do have the supreme pace. And with the DRS being enabled, I feel like it's only a matter of time before I potentially get bumped down into P3. Unless I do some very, very convincing defensive driving. And when I say convincing, I mean good racecraft, not Nikita Mazepin style. Defensive driving is basically, the best way I can describe it is you position your car in such a way that it makes it so the car behind you finds it very difficult to overtake you, but still has the opportunity to overtake you. You need to just position it in just such an awkward position that it's basically impossible for them to overtake you, but it is still possible for them to overtake you. Otherwise it's bad racecraft, because if you don't leave them a gap to overtake you, then I don't know, that's a bit dangerous, especially if you know they're going for a move and you suddenly close the door. That can cause severe problems, as we've seen on multiple occasions. For example, I think China 2018 was a very good example of the difference between people defending well but not well enough and people defending too hard. In the case of Hartley and Gasly, when they were trying to coordinate a swap between them and they didn't quite get the memo, and then they collide with one another, and then obviously that triggers the safety car, which gave Daniel Ricciardo the win on that particular day. But I remember Verstappen went for a similar move to what Ricciardo did, but the door was closed on him, and he was a little bit further back, I believe, than Daniel Ricciardo. And so, yeah, things didn't quite work out the same way for him. And what could have very easily been a Red Bull 1-2 ended up being like a Red Bull 1-5 or 6, I can't quite remember, where Max Verstappen finished in that race. But yeah, that was quite memorable actually, because I think that was Daniel Ricciardo's penultimate win, at least for now. Obviously when he goes to McLaren, a whole number of things could happen, but for the time being, that was his penultimate win. So a little bit of wheel-to-wheel racing with Lewis Hamilton here. And that's what I mean by good defensive driving. You know, I let him think he got the position, when in fact he hadn't got the position. I had the position. I'm Sergio Perez. I drive for Red Bull now, and I'm the GOAT.
We're approaching the pit window. You'll be on the mediums. Gap
I really
behind is 8.3 seconds.
I really want to see Sergio Perez do very well at Red Bull. I want to see him get consistent podiums and maybe a few wins here and there. You know, and I want him to really sort of bring the fight to Max Verstappen, because I know that he's an incredibly talented driver, and I feel like given the level that he was able to turn his driving up to this year to save his seat, it would be such a shame if he doesn't display that. And you know, it might be a few races before he truly unleashes it. We might have to wait until a track that typically favours Red Bull a bit more, such as the Netherlands maybe. So they've finalised, quote unquote finalised, the F1 calendar, but obviously there's still TBC hanging over the heads of everyone. And I wonder what you guys think is going to be replacing what would have been Vietnam. I have a feeling it will be Portimao if the rumours I've heard end up being true. But it could also be Turkey. I think those are the two it's most likely to be if I had to guess. And a race in Portugal, immediately followed by a race in the Netherlands, could be quite interesting, in my opinion. But if it is Turkey, then hopefully the tarmac is a little bit grippier than it was this year's race. So we're running pretty well at the moment. It seems that Lewis Hamilton doesn't quite have an answer for me on the straights. I'm not really building a gap to him, but I'm also not. I'm not losing. I'm not getting overtaken by him. Like I'm keeping him behind. So yeah, I just have to try and keep this up for as long as I can, basically. Obviously, I'm coming into the pits on the next lap, and like I said, I think after the pit stop phase, it should become easier, because typically when you're on medium tyres, it's a little bit easier to build that gap. I don't really know why I feel that way, but I just remember in Australia, I remember back to my first race in this series, which feels like such a long time ago now, but I actually, in reality, only recorded that like maybe 3 weeks ago. Yeah, that race, Bottas was closing me down the whole time I was on the softs, and then as soon as I was on the mediums, he just had no answer to my pace whatsoever. I think I ended up building like a 5 or 6 second gap by the end. It was actually very similar to how this race is going if that also happens. Okay, neither of them boxed, which is something I was a little bit afraid they might. And then that would have brought an undercut into question. So now I just have to keep them behind for this one lap, and then we'll see what happens. But yeah, as I was saying, if I lose them on the mediums, this will basically be a carbon copy of Spain, not Spain, Australia, in that I undercut them, or not undercut them, I overtake them into turn 1, Hamilton, Bottas and Verstappen, after qualifying P4, hold off a Mercedes behind me for the entire stint on soft tyres, switch to medium tyres, and then lose the cars behind me promptly after that. That would be very interesting in my opinion if that is how this race goes, that it's basically an exact replica of what happened in my first race in this season. But yeah, after this race there's only 5 more races to go. I think it's Japan, Kota, Mexico, Brazil, Abu Dhabi. Mexico will be an interesting one. Sergio Perez's home race, of course. Obviously, I'll be chasing the win there, but whether I get it is an entirely different story. It's actually probably a circuit that is quite likely for me to get the win at, provided that I have the pace. Because people have always said that Mexico, because of the altitude of the circuit, it's typically quite a good equalizer of cars' engine power and aero power and stuff like that. Well, specifically the engine power, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And that's why Red Bull always do so well there, is because they have the superior chassis more often, and that allows them to make, like, I don't know, it basically closes the gap between the engine of the Mercedes and the, well, back when they last raced there, actually no, it would have been the Honda engine, but it would have closed the gap between the Mercedes and the Honda engine, and then previous years between the Mercedes and the Renault engines.
Look after these tyres now. We want to finish the race on this compound.
So yeah, that's a pretty interesting thing about Mexico. So as long as I have the driving skill, I'm in really good stead to win there. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there, because when I was talking, I accidentally, I don't really know what happened, but I basically, clattered my teeth together, and it was a very unpleasant sensation. I don't know if you really know what I'm talking about, but basically, my 2 teeth just kind of, came together in my mouth as I was in the middle of a sentence, and I wasn't expecting it. It's kind of like, the best way I describe it is kind of like biting your own teeth, but I don't really know how you do that. I think the worst sensation is when you go to take a bite of crunchy food and you anticipate it's going to be crunchier than it actually is, so you just end up crunching down on your own lip. That's honestly one of the worst feelings I think I've ever experienced. And it happens to me more often than I'd care to admit. Another thing that happens to me more often than I care to admit is being caught up behind Kimi Räikkönen. However, I was not waiting in that scenario. I genuinely, like, I don't think I've ever been less patient on making a move than I was there. Looks like people are coming into the pits now. As long as I'm ahead of the Mercs, I could not give a damn about what else is happening. Because I had DRS on Kimi, there's actually a very good shot that I will be though, so we should be alright here. This is Hamilton as well, and he was the leading Merc. And yeah, I actually seem to have gained a bit of time on him for now. And we'll see if Kimi Räikkönen can maybe get him into the braking zone. Yeah, that was ambitious, to be fair. But yeah, we're now broken from the DRS range of Lewis Hamilton. And could this potentially mean that I am going to now break away from the Mercedes? We'll see where Bottas comes out. I doubt he's going to overcut me, but it could happen. It feels weird doing 9 laps on the soft only to do 4 laps on the mediums. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it just feels very strange how you do that few laps on the medium tyres. Because that's only the equivalent of, like, let's say the race around here is 52 laps, just for argument's sake. I don't know how many laps it actually is. But that's the equivalent of doing 36 laps on soft and then doing 16 on medium. Which just sounds very unreasonable. But I guess it's because they can't get the tyre scaling perfect. For whatever reason. It doesn't look like the gap is actually building to Hamilton. If anything, it might be slightly closing. So we might not have a carbon copy of Australia on our hands just yet. Now it's time to see where Bottas comes out. Will it be ahead of Lewis Hamilton? It actually looks like it could be. I don't know who's going to have the run into the first corner. I guess it's actually the second corner, even though the first corner is around a DRS zone. So it's actually Bottas that comes out ahead. They swap places in the pit stop, and Hamilton, if this was real life, he would be on the radio right now asking what the hell is going on for that to have happened. But I guess when you're only a few decimal places apart, one slightly slower pit stop can do it sometimes, you know? Or maybe even just Bottas running in that clean air for an extra lap was enough for him to get ahead. And I guess at this point I have to kind of start counting my lucky stars that it was him and not me. Imagine if Bottas had got ahead of me, then I would have lost my 5th win in this series. But the bad news about that is that it does mean that the gap between me and Bottas is not going to close by as much as I was ideally hoping it would. It will still close a little bit from what I believe is 45 points to, if I maintain fastest lap, 37 points, which means I still need to run better than him in pretty much every race and by a substantial margin. Like, closing a 37 point gap is difficult. It's not impossible. With a DNF from him, it could very easily happen. But for someone who one weekend finishes P1 and another weekend finishes like P8, it's going to be quite tricky, I think. So Verstappen snatches fastest lap off of me, so that takes away a point from my my finishing total. The Mercedes don't really appear to be closing back into the DRS zone. They might have DRS on the final lap, but I don't know if they'll be in striking distance enough to really pose a threat to me. Ultimately, I'm just trying to run a quick race here if I can. I've still got plenty of fuel to burn actually, so I could try and burn a little bit of that in an attempt to snatch back fastest lap from Max Verstappen. I don't know how fast it was, but it could be like just a few tenths, and with running in rich and stuff like that, it should be not too difficult to get that back. I just need to run a good lap. What's my tyre wear looking like? Yeah, no, I can easily get fastest lap if I run on a high fuel mix. And yeah, it looks like the Mercedes are maybe getting 1 or 2 laps on me where they will be within DRS range, which means I'm not too concerned, because usually if you're just within DRS range, it's like you're just closing up on them, but you're not really in with a shot of overtaking them. Like, you get DRS when you're in when you're within 1 second. But I can't think of any time that like anyone has been a second behind at the start of a DRS zone and then overtaken at the end of the DRS zone. You know what I mean? So that on standard fuel mix was 2/10 off my personal fastest lap. So if I'm running in rich for a good portion of this lap, then we could see the potential for fastest lap. I also need to just drive really well to the racing line. Let's see, I lost 0.04 of a second there. Extended the track there, but I got away with it. Honestly, I don't know if I agree with that. I feel like that didn't lose me that much time for it to warrant being allowed. But, you know, if they're saying it's cool, I'm saying it's cool. We'll have a look and see what my pace is like going into the final sector, because if it's not that fast, then I might go back down into standard just to conserve the fuel so I don't run out before the end. But the pace is looking good, so we'll keep it going. And it's the fastest lap reclaimed.
Fastest lap of the race.
And fastest lap immediately lost, but only by 0.02 of a second, so fuck it, we're going to go for another one. I think I've got the fuel to sustain this. I can't see a world in which I'm using 2 laps of fuel in the final lap. Cut the corner there because I broke slightly too early into the corner. Honestly, I'm not sure if I actually gained time off the back of that, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Alright, so it's safe to say I probably gained a substantial amount of time by cutting that corner. But you know, as long as I don't do it again, we'll be fine.
There's only 1 lap of fuel remaining.
So yeah, just going to push hard on this lap. Just check the tyres. They're absolutely fine. They literally have not like taken anything whatsoever. So yeah, this stands a good shot of being fastest lap. Possibly. But Verstappen might be gunning for another one just to cover off any hopes of me getting fastest lap. It remains to be seen. Let's have a look.
Yes, you've done it. Well done.
Nice win, but now I'm more concerned about whether I got fastest lap or not. I got driver of the day, so that's nice. I guess it's deserved given that I made up 3 places at the start. I'm happy with that.
A great race then, and a fantastic win here in Sochi. Anthony Davidson, what helped them deliver this result, do you think?
Well, time management probably played quite a large role in the outcome of this one. As ever, it's not just about speed, it's all about maintaining that speed consistently over a stint, over a race distance. So being able to keep up the lap times while still being smooth on the controls and gentle on the tyres, that's really where the race was won today.
Racing Point's performance today has shown that they can be competitive with the veterans of the sport. They're making their way out to the podium now as we speak, and the reaction from the crowd must be incredibly uplifting for them.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that. But Doctor, give me the news. Did I get the fastest lap or did it go to some Dutchman in P4?
And after this round of the World Championship, here's how things look in the drivers' table. Well, the gap at the top of the championship has been cut down after a difficult race today for our championship leader. Let's focus on the driver of the day, Anthony Davidson. Who do you pick?
Well, you can't fault anything that Sergio Perez did out on the track today. He drove flawlessly, making him an easy pick.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes continue to extend their lead. I'm equal parts exhausted and elated with this weekend of Formula One. Be sure to join us for the next one.
Damn it, dude. Really? He took 200ths out of my lap time again. I got fastest lap, he takes 200ths out, so I set one 5/10 faster, and he takes 200ths out of it again. I can't win, man, I swear. It's like he knew I was gunning for it. But anyway, it's still P1. Still closing that gap to Valtteri Bottas. I'm now at 200 points, which is pretty good. Interestingly, everyone that got 100 points in the Formula 1 season in real life this year also has 100 points in this season. However, Alexander Albon is doing a lot better than he did in the real life season. One thing to take with a grain of salt is that there was only 17 races, and this was race number 17 in this case. So this could act as almost a snapshot for this championship, reflective or comparatively when you look at the real life championship. And it's pretty similar. Albon's a bit too high. Sainz isn't quite high enough. Vettel is a bit too high. Norris isn't high enough. And Gasly isn't quite high enough either. But apart from that, it's a fairly decent reflection of how things went. Obviously, Bottas and Verstappen would need to swap places as well. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say about that one. If you enjoyed, make sure you like and subscribe. And hopefully I will see you in the next one.